and then if we need to dive deeper, we can. The PSBA has come out with changes that they believe would meet the regulatory requirements of these changes. So that's what will be reviewed this evening. This actually came out, the changes to the amendments to the Title IX regulations actually came out in May of 2020. I think, as you all recall, we were in the middle of a pandemic, and so it's taken school districts and solicitors and all of us some time to really catch up to understand what these changes mean, and now we're all putting our efforts into trying to meet this by August 14th is the deadline. There's been multiple requests to the Office for Civil Rights to extend this, but they believe that they gave us plenty of time to institute all of these regulatory changes. I think we're doing our best, and we're putting some things in place in order to make sure, like meeting this policy, that we meet those deadlines. So some of the things, just as a reminder, Title IX is a federal statute that addresses sex discrimination in education programs and activities. So unlike discrimination, we have a non-discrimination policy that we'll talk about. This is just a piece of that. And again, it's basis of sex in education programs and activities. These new provisions affect not only elementary and secondary, also affects post-secondary institutions of higher ed. So higher ed has actually been instituting some of the things that we'll be talking about tonight, and has been working with some of these rules for quite some time, now that we are going to be asked to as well. Some of the new provisions have changed specific definitions for what constitutes sexual harassment, and how we are to respond to that, both by reports and formal complaints. There are a few things in the policies that are changing. Some of those include the definition of sexual harassment has changed, so that will be added to the policy. The requirements to have a Title IX coordinator, that hasn't specifically changed. We've always had a Title IX coordinator, but their duties have. So for those of you who may not be aware, I am the Title IX coordinator for the district. Most districts do appoint their Director of Human Resources to that role. Under that role, the Title IX officer is responsible for carrying out and implementing the requirements of the other key roles. So this is something new for us, is that you have to not only have a Title IX coordinator, but you also have to include others in that process. So some of those key roles may include deputy Title IX officers, which may be a principal or athletic director, investigators. There's incredibly complex, detailed ways in which these incidences need to be investigated. So investigators have to be specifically trained to do that. Decision makers, you can't have a Title IX coordinator that is also making decisions on what happens with the case now. So the Title IX officer can't be everything. So the Title IX officer has to oversee the process. They can sometimes investigate. It's not recommended. And then they can't make the decision, and they can't be the appellate decision maker either. So we really need a Title IX officer, deputy Title IX officers, investigators, decision makers, and then an appellate decision maker or appellate decision making team. So all of that is something new that secondary and elementary institutions are grappling with. There's also specific training requirements. So we have been working in the districts the last week and this week to train all of our administrators who may assume one of these roles or be someone who may be part of the process as a resource to to get this training and to meet these requirements by August 14th. So we had 2 days of training that our administrators could attend. They could pick which one they wanted in order for us to meet that requirement. I myself have also had additional training in order to understand my role in this process. Some other key things that have changed is that the actual knowledge piece, that it is enough for someone to tell any adult in a school district, report to them, and that assumes that the district has actual knowledge of something happening. So it's going to be really important for us to ensure that we're training all of our staff, that they understand that if someone is reporting to them, who they go to with that information. So that's changed. Also, the grievance process to address formal complaints of sexual harassment, including expanded requirements, again, of investigation, putting people on notice, which is new, the participation of all parties in the investigation process, and then written determinations regarding the actual outcomes to both parties as well. And then also a appeal process. There's also a piece in here designating supportive measures. That's also a really big piece of these new regulations, that you're providing supportive measures for those who are going through this process. So as you're going through investigation, as they're reporting, you're supporting the complainant and the respondent, so the person making the complaint and then also the person that the complaint is against, making sure that there's supportive measures in order for them to continue their education during this, or being able to continue to work. And finally, there's specific notification, document, and recording, record keeping requirements that are also part of the statute. So, that'll also be part of my role as Title IX coordinator, to ensure that, record keeping and documentation are all housed appropriately. So my final reminder is that this is not just students. So this is students and its staff. So there are 2 policies governing, there's one governing students and then another governing employees.
All right, thank you. Well, given that policy 103 and policy 104 are pretty similar, I think we can kind of just discuss them together and see if there are any questions from other committee members.
And I had a question about, you mentioned about reporting, and if there's a report that whoever the report is made to, has to follow through. Is there a definition of report? Like, how is there something that parents and or students need to be educated on? Because you don't want it to be hearsay, but you don't want it to be something that's overlooked.
So one of the pieces to this is going to be an extensive intake process. What we have to communicate to anybody working in our buildings, whether they're a contractor, whether they're a bus driver, whether they are a teacher or administrator, is that when they receive a report, they need to know who to take that to. So our principals will all be appellate, or all be deputy Title IX coordinators. So they will understand this role. So we will, institute and let everyone know, hey, this is Title IX, and we need you to know if there's any kind of complaint by a student or by an employee that looks like discrimination or sex discrimination, or they're coming to you. It's not on the burden of the person making the complaint to know the process. They don't have to know what form to fill out. They don't have to know what adult that they're supposed to tell. They should be able to tell any adult and get the information to the right spot. So as that information comes to a, principal, or, starts working its way up, that's when we do a detailed intake to see, where does this fall? And again, remember, this is a very small piece of the discrimination pie. This is just sex discrimination in education. and educational programming. So in order to find that out, there's really this large intake that has to happen to say, where does this fall? I have to decide, or the principal has to decide, what forms really do need to fill out, and who needs to make these, where does this need to go? Is this a Title IX? Is this discrimination? Which policy does it fall under? And it's really our job as administrators to figure that out.
But previously we had talked about mandated reporters being required to call Childline. How does this integrate with or conflict with that?
It doesn't. Again, we all have a duty to report. So if there's specific information that would fall under the mandated reporting guidelines, they would have to report. And again, we also ask that that information gets pushed up. So as they're making a report, they're pushing that up to to an administrator, to a principal, to another administrator in the organization. So again, that should all really siphon back to me to say, hey, is this a 9? Does this, is this a Title IX? Does it fall into that category? This could touch multiple different policies. It may touch Title IX, but it may also touch bullying. It may also touch hazing. We may have to report to Childline on these instances. This could be a criminal issue. All of those things can still happen, as well as we follow the Title IX regulations. So that's in addition to, I think, is the answer to that.
Okay, so it sounds like the intention of some of these changes is to involve more people in the process so that things can't just be swept under the rug or centralized to one person who handles them all the same way. Is that a true characterization of?
Absolutely, and this has been, and that's how higher ed's been handling this for many years. Again, and it's a big job. It's a big job to make sure and oversee that this is doing, that the whole process is actually working. So to ask a Title IX coordinator to do that, and in addition to investigate, in addition to make the decision, it doesn't seem like that would be, this seems like a better way to handle this type of investigation, especially with these are serious allegations that would fall under a Title IX.
But I guess we're just fortunate that we're a large enough school district that we have enough resources to make that reasonable.
I
imagine it would be very
I would argue the reasonableness, but because again,
okay.
I mean, there are higher ed institutions have sole Title IX coordinators who are designated to just do this. So
it just seems like a lot of overhead for a smaller school district is what I was saying.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It will be very difficult for a smaller school district to implement this. Luckily, you can't outsource the entire process. You have to have a Title IX coordinator. It has to be someone on your faculty. But there are pieces of this that you can. So the investigation piece, my recommendation at this point is we do work with organizations that will specialize in the investigation piece, because it is so complex that no one on our staff has currently been trained to do it in this manner. So until we are, I would suggest that we work with our solicitor and we work with our respective organizations who will be carving these positions out to do that, because I just don't know that it's just too complex at this point for us to make sure we do it right.
It seems that Title IX sexual harassment versus sex discrimination is kind of blurred. And with this new definition of Title IX sexual harassment, do you think there's a higher bar to bring complaints under that new definition, or is it just is it clearer, or how would you say it is compared? Getting a sexual harassment grievance, how is that compared now versus the previous regulations?
Compared to the previous, it is a higher standard the new definition of sexual harassment. I don't believe it doesn't mean that if there is a lesser form that it doesn't fall under our other discrimination policies, and that it wouldn't be handled. It just wouldn't have to go under the same scrutiny and the same process as a Title IX investigation. So even if it doesn't meet that specific standard, I still think there could be instances where, you know, we would still be handling and dealing with those employee or student issues. We just would be doing it in a more informal way than this formal process.
Okay. You know, under discipline, there should be no sanctions against the respondent until the entire grievance process has gone through, and that includes any appeals which the respondent may make. And they're not supposed to, like I said, they're not supposed to have any discipline against them. But part of the discipline that could be against them is loss of school privileges. What happens when both the accuser and the respondent are like in the same class or club or chorus? How do we deal with that?
So the piece of that has changed is that, and I believe this was in the old regulation, but it's being, it's being emphasized, is the supportive measure piece. So while both are going through the process, you may not have made a determination as to the guilt or not guilt, or, you know, the recommendations for discipline down the road, but you can still put in supportive measures, and that goes for both parties. So if, you know, you have a claimant who's made a claim against a respondent and they're uncomfortable and they need to not be in the class with that person, during this process, you can still make those determinations, at least temporarily. You can still take a employee and put them on administrative leave. You can still do some of those things without doing actual discipline. You may just separate. You may, you may make adjustments to schedules, those kinds of things. In the meantime, while you're doing this, so
can you remove kids from activities if they're
accused?
Respondent.
You could. That could possibly be something.
Before, and that's not discipline then.
As long as it was, again, I'm not exactly sure. I think we would have to take a look at a specific example, but I would assume that would be something that you could do temporarily, to remove two people in the same space.
But
until the final decision was made.
It's since the respondent is obviously innocent and seems to have more rights now than previously. Why would the person making the complaint be removed or not removed, or why would the respondent be removed or not removed? I mean, say both are in chorus and there's 30 people there. The person making the complaint feels uneasy about being in that with the respondent, but the respondent wants to be in chorus. Since they're both kind of more equal in standing, how do you make a determination who gets to leave or who gets to stay, or do they both leave?
Yeah, we'd definitely have to get to that when that situation would arise. I mean, again, the statute just says that we have to provide supportive measures. So what those are exactly is, us, Title IX officer and the deputies and administrators working together to figure out what meets the needs of everyone. So we wouldn't want to punish anybody in the interim for that, but we would just have to make decisions that work best for all parties. And again, you just have to consider all parties in this, and that is something that the new regulations specify, that you also have to provide supportive measures to the respondent. So if they need counseling and they're having a hard time going through this process, that may also be something that you may need. They might have had to testify or talk to a principal, and now they missed a test. They might need more time to take that test. So there's all types of situations like that you know, could arise, and we would have to handle them as a team, and with the respondent and the complainant.
Yeah.
Do
Let me
we
let me
have-
just
Go
let me
ahead.
just add. You know, I've been reading this stuff pretty superficially, and you guys have been, you know, delving into it, you know, in minutia. So I appreciate, you know, if you don't have an answer yet for a lot of these things, because it's just that complex.
Yeah, I mean, I did 3 days of training, and it's still there's still a lot of things that you know, there's still a lot more training to be had. There's more understanding that's needed, and none of us are an expert in all the areas in which you need to be an expert here. So you know, like the 504s and IEPs and all the things that will come into this. You know, student discipline, obviously not my area of expertise. So there's a lot of things that we'll have to work together as a team. And I'll be honest, I mean, the first Title IX investigation, or the first investigation that we see that looks like a Title IX, I mean, we'll be working very closely as an administrative team, as well as with our solicitors, to make sure that we're doing this the right way.
Do we have, Danielle, resources that we need to add, the counseling or contracts that we need to put in place to adhere to this, or do we already have counseling and these restorative service providers in place in the district?
Rich,
We
do you want
already
to
have
chime in on that? Yeah, there you
We
go.
already have those things in place, Mr. Friel.
Okay.
Yeah, we do have them in place, and we prepared when the administration reviews it and they come up with some measures based on pending investigation. We have counseling readily available, and of course, staff have employee assistance group as well. And one of the things I want to point out with your question about disciplinary consequences is there are some decisions to make related to these policies. So as you look through 103, the draft, page 8 out of 12 and 9 out of 12, there's some things that we have to look at to make some choices of. And if you see that, 8 out of 12, recommendation is that we choose all of those. So if the student is determined to be responsible for a violation, any of these things could happen. And you know, school privileges, activities, detention, suspension, expulsion, law enforcement officials would be some consequences that we could choose, and this policy would affirm. So if you want to talk about that or agree to choose all of those.
Well, choosing all of them provides more flexibility in each individual instance, right?
Correct.
So it does seem
And that-
wise for us to keep them all in there so we have the option. We don't want to cut off
Right.
an
And
option
that-
while we're getting used to these new regulations.
Correct.
So how do you choose which one to apply? What's
the
the
question.
criteria here for suspension and
That's their
expulsion
job.
versus loss of privileges?
Pending the investigation.
Right.
Yeah, as Danielle said, there's a whole lot of people who have different roles, and there's investigators, decision makers, deputies, appellates, and so a lot of this stuff, the end consequence would end up going through all those steps to decide how it's determined.
It also comes into play if there's been any kind of other disciplinary action and the severity of the action.
So you guys feel
Danielle, I'm back.
comfortable with that step? You know, if you have all these decision makers, that the same incident that happens in one building, similar incidents happen in other building, we're going to handle discipline it the same way versus us disproportionately handling it one building to another building because we have all the now multiple decision makers. You know, I'm just, you know, I always worry when I see something like that, just, you know, what's the clarity of, you know, if I get in a fight, I should get suspended for 3 days. It's pretty like a straightforward thing, right?
That's different. Title IX.
How do
I'm
we-
gonna jump in really quick because I don't know, Danielle, I shouldn't probably answer for you, but from a Title IX perspective, Danielle is our point of clarity and consistency. So she would have an eye on, are we consistently handling various Title IX issues, correct? Make sure I'm
Right.
saying that. Where what I think you're asking, Paul, is broader than Title IX and is a whole nother thing that part of our like investigation, you know, or look into how we operate in our processes.
And I
Is
think
that a
you'll
correct
see in
statement too?
103, yeah, I think you'll see in 103 and 104, it's a general policy that covers non-discrimination, and Title IX is included as part of that. So anything that would fall under that umbrella, you know, it wouldn't just be Title IX. So I would oversee the Title IX process, but the administration and principals would also, you know, work with the non-discrimination policy. But as you're going to see, there's multiple policies that this touches that will have to be revised because, you know, Title IX isn't, you know, it's going to touch other policies that need to be updated. So
The reason I jumped in, and I'm sorry, but you know, I deal with this in daily life, is that Paul, I'm passionate about what you're speaking to as well. That's a process thing more than a policy thing. Like we have all these different policies that are covering these different types of harassment and or issues. We have those to refer to and to use to our advantage in order to apply measures against these violations. But at the end of the day, if we're not following our processes properly, or you know, coordinating properly or communicating properly, then it's all for naught. So that what you're asking about is very, very important topic, but I think it has to be addressed from a process standpoint.
Yeah, but we have policies that enforce discipline measures, right?
Yeah.
You get caught with drugs and marijuana, you have a specific discipline measure that's in policy, right? So we have other policies that do enforce a specific disciplinary action, right? Or is that correct?
So are you suggesting that I don't know that we could do that with this type of a topic though, because it's so situational. I deal with it in my daily life. There's no way you can say, have one policy that covers this as a blanket. You can for if you get caught with so much marijuana, that's the thing, and that's the punishment, you know, but you can't with harassment. There's too many circumstances.
Yeah.
And
Danielle, I have a question from a higher level, which from a governance standpoint. So you mentioned these regs came out in May. We've had a few things going on, right? Like reopening plans, a pandemic, ESY, all that stuff. I guess my concern from a governance standpoint, with the said resources that we could contract out with for the things that we don't have the specialized knowledge in, and the training that you've already done and others have already done, do you feel that we're adequately prepared to enforce the policy as far as it's clear? I know there may be areas that we still need solicitor to weigh in on, but this committee will recommend it for the approval of the board. The board then, if they take the advice of the committee, is going to approve that. And we would do that with an understanding that you all feel prepared. Are you in a position to say, we're pretty well set, we know enough about the major parts of the policy, and we have the resources in place to cover the parts that we know we don't know, for us to forward this to the board?
yes, and I think the most important part of this is, yes, we could all use more training, and we will certainly be doing that as we go through the year and continue the training, because this doesn't stop after, you know, the 14th. You know, we all certainly could be more prepared. This is very complex. It's brand new for many of us. I think the most important thing that everyone needs to know, and what we'll be focusing on, and what we have been focusing on, is that people need to know that this has changed. If they receive a report that sounds like this, they need, you know, anybody has to push it up, but that it has to come to the Title IX coordinator. So we, you know, so I can do an intake. I can make sure this goes to the right spot. So I know enough to do that. And I also we'll also know that if there is a piece of this that we need assistance on, that our solicitors are available to do that.
And do we have to name the investigators, decision makers, all those groups up front, or is that something that's an ad hoc as needed based on the incident?
We are doing that as we speak. We don't necessarily have to put it into the policy. The only person that you have to name is the Title IX officer. You don't necessarily have to name the others. We are doing that at this time. We are selecting those individuals for those roles. So, because we did have to identify people that would need the advanced training. Fox Rothschild came together and put together a toolkit for school districts that we purchased, and it provided training. It provided some policy and forms for us to use. And again, they'll also be there for us if we need guidance during this process.
Okay, thank you.
In attachments 2 and 3, there are a couple areas where time frames are given. For example, it says step 4, the investigator shall prepare and submit a written report to the compliance officer within, and then you can, circle 20 days, or you can circle 30 days, or you can fill in the blank days. Who decides how long that process will take and how long it should be submitted?
We do.
Okay, so how do you decide 20 versus 100 days?
So I think you want to, obviously they give you 2 examples, and I would pick 20 or 30. We'll also have to decide if it's school days or calendar days. Again, I think calendar days would make more sense. So I think we would want to be timely, but also give ourselves enough time in case we needed it to, complete the investigation or complete the process.
Okay. Any more questions?
Well,
I did have a question about regulation or policy 103A, the regulation. Just I know Dr. Martini had mentioned it's only a sentence long, and if you could explain that for people who didn't hear the reason.
Since we have to put into place new Title IX regs as of August 14th, and this is still going to go to a first reading, it could take a few months to be completely passed and up on our website. We're allowed to post a draft, but we thought maybe of adding a regulation that just basically says that all Title IX regs, all new Title IX regs are in place as of August 19th. That way there wouldn't be any question of, well, you don't have it on your website. We're in the process of doing that, just to make sure it's clear. And then when all edits are made, we can take that off in a couple months.
Okay, thank you. Jennifer?
Just there were a couple of notes in the draft version about need to decide whether to leave this section in or remove and put in attachments. So like I'm seeing in 103, I'm seeing that note on 7 of 12 and 9 of 12. And I assume that refers to the sections immediately afterwards, which are in black.
And also on page 6, it says, have we
missed one.
decided if the section about building principal responsibilities should remain?
Right, so do we need to make those decisions tonight?
Yes, that would be helpful if we could have some direction. So as I'm taking my notes, it looks like we're looking at, for some of the decisions, 30 calendar days was the recommendation from Mrs. Hay. And then for some of the others, if you're not sure, on the actual policy draft, if you scroll to the bottom, there's attachments. And we're looking at attachment 2 for policy 103. So there's some decisions there.
Do you guys have a recommendation? Which way to go?
My recommendation would be to adopt PSBA's standard as presented. And just so I think it was left in there so you could see what was changing. However, I would adopt what PSBA has asked. We do believe that there will be future changes to this. It makes it much easier if we adopt the PSBA format. When we go to make future changes, it streamlines it a bit. We also obviously trust PSBA. They've been working with their with their attorneys on this as well to make sure that it meets the regulatory requirements. So I would suggest passing what PSBA has recommended.
So to clarify, attachment 2, policy 103 attachment 2 is a PBSA recommended document?
Yeah.
Yes, it is. It's consistent with the training that we've all received also.
So
And
what,
Okay.
those sections should remain in the policy, or they should be taken out and.
That's the decision we need to make. And I mean, from my policy work, that I've done in my career, I always prefer to have one source of record for anything that has similar language, because otherwise you run into confusion when people read a slightly different terminology in two different locations. So if 103 attachment 2 is recommended because that is the exact PBSA wording, then I think we should take anything that is close to that out of 103 so that it only exists in one place. That would be my preference.
I agree. Paul, John, yes.
I'm not following exactly, like on 712, are we taking that, is it a recommendation to remove the principal building section? Is that what we're saying? Is that following PSBA or not? I'm just unclear on that point.
I'm sorry, Paul, where are you again?
So like on the section on 7, where it's the bill, I guess,
Both on.
need to decide whether to keep this section about building principal responsibilities in or remove and use info and attachments. So we're saying remove all this from the building principal down. Items 1 through 6, that's being removed.
Is that attachment 3?
In the body of the policy itself.
Yeah, it's in the body of the policy in the draft.
Oh, I'm sorry.
On page 7 of 12, and in the middle of the text, need to decide whether to keep this section. I just want to make sure I'm understanding what the recommendation is. Is that we're saying remove?
Paul,
this?
scroll to the bottom of the policy, all the way past like the references,
Yep,
and you see those attachments.
yep.
Those attachments have the wording of that section.
Okay, so the answer to my question is yes.
Yeah.
In the affirmative, we're saying remove these items 1 through 6.
And keep the attachments.
Oh,
And keep the
okay,
attachments.
I just trying to get clarity on that.
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Any other questions about 103 or 104? I think what we'll do is discuss all these policies, and at the end we can motion if we want to add them on to the full board. In that respect, then let us go on to the next policy. On bullying and cyberbullying. Am I seeing that right?
I think you want to do 247.
Okay. Thank
You're
you.
on 3.03.
Okay. Hazing. Any questions about hazing?
These are all PSBA recommendations, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
They're exactly what they recommended for us to do. All of these policies from 3.03 all the way to 3.09 have implications to 103. And so
Okay.
the SBA recommended we make those language changes as presented.
And you're
I did-
okay with the things like calisthenics in there?
It's just moved from 3 to 2 or 2 to 3. It's mostly just moving words around as far as I
Yeah.
could tell.
Except I think there's a little typo on page 3 under delegation of responsibility. It reads students, parents, guardians, etc. shall engage in, condone, or ignore any form. There should be a no in there somewhere.
Is that in hazing, John?
Yeah.
Under hazing?
On page 3 under delegation of responsibility. The first sentence.
Got it. Shall not.
Yes.
I
Yeah,
don't
let's
want-
definitely
I
make
don't want
that
that to be
change.
policy, okay? Not under
Yeah.
my watch.
You
Good
said you
catch.
I'm
got
gonna
nice
be
job.
firm about this one, okay?
We'll make that change.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now, 249, bullying and cyberbullying. I didn't see any significant changes, so shall we just move on to the next one? And the next one is 252, policy 252, which is a new policy in regards to dating violence. Does Mrs. Hay want to just say something about that? Or is that's just from the PSBA, or is that also in the new regs?
It was recommended by PSBA.
Okay.
Dating violence is also another area in which there has been further guidance on in the policy, and they touch upon as being one of the issues under sex discrimination.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the new policy.
Yeah, and I think some of this stuff like the dating violence education was things that our board had talked about trying to focus on regardless, right? So
Yes.
this is in line with what we've been hoping to move towards anyway.
And just to be clear, like in the dating violence on the first section of page 2, where it looks like somebody needs to make choices again, is that up to us to choose all 3 of those, building principal, guidance counselor, classroom teacher, if we wish, or what do we need to do there?
That is an option. We would recommend all 3 just so you can have those options.
Okay. I mean, I'd recommend all 3. I want to get people to be able to talk to as many people as they can in order to get it to Danielle as our Title IX coordinator.
Okay, so the rest of the policies, I think 317.1, 417.1, 517.1, and 824 are just wording changes. There's no significant changes, correct?
No, I think that's there's a pretty significant word in there.
Which one?
Indicted, I think. Is
that a new word?
Yeah, let me find an example for you. So in 317.1, look at page 2 of 4, number 2, under duty to report. It's not just who has been arrested or convicted of, it's arrested or indicted for or convicted of.
There's a large paragraph on page 3 that's been included too.
Mm-hmm.
That's in all 3.
The standard paragraph for all of them.
Yeah, that's just kind of a.
Yeah, that didn't seem to be distinct from the others, but. And also in number 1, under duty to report, intent to dismiss or remove for cause, notice of non-renewal for cause, notice of removal. It just it makes it a little bit broader in interpretation, so that if one of those specific cases where somebody had been under notice of non-renewal and indicted, that maybe their lawyer could have argued that they weren't covered under the previous wording and this covers them. So it looks to me like it makes it more watertight.
Good thing. You have any other questions or concerns?
No.
All right. So given that, do I have a motion to accept policies, the whole thing, 3.01, 3.02 to 3.09? Those policies should be moved to the full board.
So moved, John.
Second.
I'll give a third. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, passes. Moving on to 4, policy review, new policies, and our requested changes. 4.01 is the responsibility of staff for student welfare. I believe that 440 I said? Okay. So I think the change was suggested by the REA. Since students are often using the lab when they are not in class, it was suggested that we change the wording or that we strike the wording regularly scheduled period.
That makes sense.
Yep.
Okay. All right, motion to accept that.
So moved.
Second.
All those in
Sure.
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Moving on.
I got too many devices open here. Wait, somebody tell me what's next on the agenda because I lost it.
Next one is
Oh, here it is.
acceptable use of
4.02.
internet, computers, and network resources. Yeah, we realized that when we had made adjustments to this, we got rid of the regulation 815A, but it still was cited in the policy. So we'd like to take out that sentence. 815A regulation was very dated and it was removed. So we just wanted to be consistent with this change of not having that regulation.
Everybody fine with that?
Yep.
Yeah, and it looks like you just inserted a form that maybe we hadn't had at one time, right, Rich? The acceptable use policy acknowledgement form?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So the form
Which
is now an acceptable use of technology versus the hard copy.
I think we did review that form before.
We did, yeah.
All good.
Right,
I move
motion
we forward
to
that.
second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Next, we have two policies that we're going to have discussion in regards to. The first is policy 006.1, attendance at board meetings via speakerphone.
Is that like
Not
two
dated at
tin
all.
cans and a string?
It's
John?
so quaint.
I'm too young. I don't know what they were. Okay, let's have some discussion about that. Let me see what I have.
Yeah, this is one I'll tell you I feel is antiquated.
Yeah.
It's not like we all are not participating via a form of communication that isn't even mentioned in this policy. And I think that we've seen firsthand how members of the public benefit from kind of the cyber approach, the Zoom meetings. I think that we would enable in the future potential board members who are thinking, I'd like to serve, but I can't always guarantee that I could be there. The opportunity to be there via virtual meeting. I think that, you know, there should still be a policy about if a board member flat out doesn't attend so many meetings or so many in a row. But to be honest, the participation versus Zoom or whatever the platform versus being there in person, I think the difference is negligible, other than obviously we'd love to be together physically, all other things aside, because there's a lot of things that happen when you're in person. But I think this thing needs to be updated for the 21st century.
Yeah.
Updated or removed entirely? I'm trying to figure out if anything else calls it.
It's a good question.
So I just tried to pull up 006 and skim through it, and I don't see any reference to speakerphone or attendance there, but I could be overlooking it because I'm looking so quickly.
So anybody know, is there any reference to board attendance at meetings separate from this document here?
There is.
That's
Yeah,
what I'm trying to
I'm
find.
looking for it. There is.
Okay, so you're also looking.
Because remember, we had to amend it when we
Yeah.
to this virtual platform.
Right.
And we had it linked right on the board's homepage, but that's since changed.
I mean, I think so. In the general, we're not going to rewrite it all today, but the general, I think, feeling is attendance by some type of electronic format is acceptable wherever it fits in the policy. If this gets removed and just added to the other policy, I think that's what's under consideration or under discussion. And I'm with John on this one. I think this has been a real big benefit to the public to be able to join this way. So, and I think it's a benefit for all the board members, you know, wherever we are, you can join via some electronic means. And I think as long as you can participate in a meeting and can be heard and can hear the meeting, I think that should be the standard of participation, and you're there.
I believe the technology, so if you look at those 3 requirements, right? Submit a written request to the board president at least 3 days prior to the meeting. Again, I like Jennifer's word of quaint, right?
Yeah.
If I found out a day before because I was in another city that I couldn't make the next night's meeting in person, but I'm sitting in a hotel room, why would I not want to participate via virtual means, right? Ensure the meeting location is quiet and free from background noise. We can mute ourselves if we need to, except that you wouldn't want a party going on when you're trying to comment on something that's going on. So I just think this whole policy needs to be looked at. And again, I'd be comfortable saying, as long as there's something governing that we have participation in the board meetings, you know, we can't have board members that are flat out absent. I would consider, Jennifer, you mentioned throwing this whole thing out. I don't know that it's really applicable.
Yeah.
There's a question, you know, eventually COVID's going to go away and we're going to be able to meet without any constraints. Does that mean that I never have to attend physically, even if I'm in my house in East Vincent?
That's where I think you should look at that other policy that talks about physical meetings. But I would say 2 meetings. I don't know. That seems a little stringent to me.
No, I agree with, you know, if you're out traveling, if you're, you know, whatever. But I'm just concerned that, you know, a board member may never want to come in you know, to a physical meeting, and, you know, I could stay in East Vincent and, you know, mute myself and go get a snack, you know?
Yeah.
So I think we need to make sure
participation, right, John? Not attendance.
Right. Correct.
Right.
So I think a participation in the meeting should be required, but attend, you know, different than I just mute myself. But I mean, there could be someone who has a physical disability that it's easier or it's more difficult to attend certain meetings at certain times, or someone breaks their leg or something, you know, for whatever. It doesn't even have to be a reason. If you participate in a meeting and you're active, why do we care?
Yeah, I think that's the only thing that's worth saving out of that 06, that one that we're looking at, is the statement about, you know, that they need to be able to hear and they need to be heard. And as long as you're fulfilling those 2 things, then we should be able to allow remote participation without a limit as to exactly how many times.
I agree with all 3 of you. I'm just kind of playing the devil's advocate because, you know, I do see a benefit in being physically present because after meetings, a lot of times we get to talk with the public, hear different points of view, and those are advantageous. So again, I'm just thinking, you know, if I don't want to ever leave my house and I just have no reason, I just want to stay in the house, is that okay?
Yeah, and John, I'd be very open to talking about some kind of a minimum attendance, right? I don't necessarily think that when you run for school board, you know, you should think that you don't have to physically show up at all for anything.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think we ought to look at that other policy to see what our mandated attendance or participation is. But I think we could be more liberal and still meet the needs for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, because let's be honest, John, too. I mean, someone can just show up and do nothing too, right? Physical
Why are you
attendance.
looking at me?
Physical attendance.
That's why we say you have
Yeah,
to
who
be
are you
present, Paul.
directing that at?
Careful.
I just want to make sure everybody understands too, if you're not on district property and you don't have internet access or something goes down on your remote end, we may have to cancel the meeting because we don't have enough people, and things like that. So as great as technology is, we still have to be cautious on your internet connection, where you are, participation, that meetings don't get canceled because you got disconnected or things like that. So just take all that into consideration when thinking about this. I know other districts doing the same thing, and that's devil's advocate, as Dr. Melizak was saying. Like, if you're saying East Vincent, you would want to come here because of that. We were out for 3 days with storms and things like that. So just remember there's other side of that convenience piece that we may be overlooking.
Great, but we need to figure out where the policy is that addresses that attendance,
Right.
because I could have sworn it was in here somewhere, like Dr. Lloyd said, and I am just not finding it. I'm scrolling
Yeah,
through
but
a
I mean,
bunch.
Nick, if you don't come to a meeting because you're traveling and the meeting gets canceled, then you have to change dates. The reverse is true. Hey, now I can participate because I'm traveling, but I can hit it.
Yeah,
and
but you wouldn't necessarily cancel a meeting if I physically could be there, right? So if I called Leslie and said a week before the meeting, hey, death of the family, I've got to fly somewhere, you all still going to hold the board meeting, correct? It's
If
just
8
that
out
I
of 9
couldn't-
can make
it's just
it.
that I
Well,
missed.
I think it's more on a quorum for like a committee meeting would be. People couldn't make a committee meeting, we didn't have a quorum. That would be it really wouldn't affect a board meeting.
I thought Carl said before, if I remember, I thought he said there was no requirement anywhere on attendance at committee meetings. I could be wrong about that we might have to search for that one as well.
But a committee meeting can't act without a quorum, though.
That's
right. You
correct.
don't have to attend it, but you wouldn't be able to then, like, we couldn't advance the policies. We didn't have a quorum.
Right.
That would be the only problem.
Right.
Yeah, I think we might be overthinking it. I think if we just go review the other policy and just make it a lot more liberal, I think it's participation. If you can participate and you do participate.
So we want to delete this policy.
I think
I want to revise it.
before we
Revise it.
move to that, we got to see what the other policy says.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So what I can do is we can take a run at amending this to first say technology instead of speakerphone, and then look at the number, and then I can cross-reference this policy with the other policies to see if any intersect and conflict with it, rather than just.
I would actually vote what Jennifer said, delete the policy and just add the amendment to the attendance of the board meeting policy.
But we have to find it first before we can delete this one, right?
Yeah, we don't have to do anything yet. I'm just saying I would kind of go delete this and just add a little blurb to the other one.
So we'll discuss this again next meeting and delete it at that time.
Yep.
We're putting
And
it on
then we-
notice.
And then I can show you edits to the other policy for you to discuss at next L&P.
And I would really like Dr. Lloyd's and other administrators' input on that one, just to be sure there's nothing like Mr. San Francisco just brought up that we're just not thinking about.
So it looks to me that you started to work on this policy on 4/22. And
Something happened.
yes, something happened, known as pandemic. And so you started to work on this because you even put in language about emergency conditions. So I can see where you started working on this. So it looks like we just have to go back to that one.
Okay.
Is that in 006?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay.
So
I'm just not finding it because I'm looking at the final version that doesn't have any.
right, and so I found it under those meeting minutes from the 22nd.
All right. Well, Dr. Marchini will have something new for us next time.
Yep.
All right. Lastly, policy 100, records management. We had some discussion in the past about email retention.
Yep.
And I think we had asked Mr. San Francisco about some costs, maybe about longer retention times, or what's the thoughts going on now? Right now it's 90 days, correct? For emails.
Yeah, I think we should go to 18 months.
Yeah, the recommendation was to go 180 days.
Recommendation from where?
From last meeting.
Correct.
Would that be, does it matter how long we keep it?
I think we should go longer. 180 days?
Can't be your.
Yeah, I think it should be longer than that. I'd say 18 months. And are you sure about that, Paul? I don't remember ever having a 6-month recommendation.
Yeah, I thought Paul was.
I thought it was 18 months.
I mean, Paul Friel was asking Paul Sanford.
Yeah.
Longer. Not to be confusing.
Yeah. The initial recommendation was 180 days, but you had asked for prices for keeping things up until 18 months.
And this was just on school board correspondence, right?
No, this was, I think, yeah, we already did school board.
I thought we did. Okay, that's what I was trying to.
This is the general retention, because if it doesn't last the whole school year and into the following year, you just lose.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't see the difference between 90 days and 180 days.
I'm looking at that crazy table with all the dates on it, all the retention periods, and trying to figure out where this one fits. Or is it changing a bunch of them?
Well, we have an automatic deletion after 90 days. I think that was the first part of like, why? I mean, that's just not something we see the corporate world. And our solicitor, when we talked to them, recommended going longer as well, that this didn't make sense, didn't help us. And I know, Paul, you got back to us, San Francisco, that since we moved to the new server, there's capacity to do this. So how hard is the move to go to 18 months if we did a recommendation 18 months?
We have everything set up that we can do a year. So I can look into it, but yes, we can do that.
You can do 1 year tomorrow. No
Yes.
problem.
Yep.
So Paul Friel, I guess what I'm asking is if you open that attachment, right, which is the model records retention schedule, and which item are we talking about in terms of records to extend this?
I'm going on memory, John, because I lost this board document. I'm trying to get back to it.
Mr. Deal, in the retention policy with email, it'll say 90 days. They want to change that to just the email section to a year.
Okay, I'm looking. There's so many records on here.
Oh, I know.
For the,
Yeah.
Same trouble, John.
Yeah. You got a page off the top of your head?
yeah, or even a section.
I'll defer to Dr. Marchini on that one.
You're the IT guy.
I'm looking. I had this. Page, it's like administrative regulation number 7, page 4.
Okay, got it.
I'm not there yet.
Now I see page 4, and I see item number 7, but it doesn't have any days listed in there, does it? So I went down to the table.
Yeah, it's in the first administrative records, page 15. It has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cells down.
Got it. Got it. Yep,
90
that's
days.
it. It's item 15, administration records.
Yep. In the table,
Correspondence / email. It's like the 5th or 6th one down.
yeah.
Did you guys find it yet? It's on page 7.
That's the only place I saw that lists the 90. So that would be the only edit that we would have to make with this record.
Okay, and that's to, that says to or from school district employees. Okay.
Why the qualification to or from school district employees? What if I'm a school district employee and I send it to a parent?
Yeah, that's just what that category says. So I don't know what would govern
Yeah,
the one you just threw out there.
Because that would be from. It's covering everything that goes through the email system of the school.
To or from, yeah. So
Oh, okay, I got you.
Yeah.
Not exclusive. Okay.
Well, everything that covers employees as opposed to students.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
I'd like to change the word employee because we do have some volunteers that have, or anybody like a long-term sub or a contracted employee. They're not technically employees. And then if the school board wants to keep their class out of that, just say anybody with a district issued email address except for school board members. If everybody's okay with that language.
Okay, but district issued, that would include students?
This is just employees. So this is just for employees and stuff like that. So it would be not students.
it would exclude students.
Correct.
We probably have privacy issues there.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that's not, our email does not go outside of the district. So the students technically don't have an email address that goes, it's an internal network that we have there. So they're not, it's all our network pieces of that.
It's also covered on page 15 under electronic mail under student records.
Right.
It says any email containing the name or personally identifiable information of a student, including emails to or from a student. So that's already covered.
And the other piece the solicitor wanted us to discuss about this is when a school board member resigns, retires, or leaves the board, since your policy right now is going to say the school board email does not have a retention, do we keep that email forever? Do we eliminate that email in the new process? What is the procedure for when school board members leave the board?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably some term of that out.
So we just removed retention entirely for school board members. We didn't put any long period. I mean, we could put a long period in there, like years, right?
That's up to the school board. What other districts do, everybody's under the retention, that same year thing. Or you guys want it to be on non-retention. So we just need to clarify when you do leave, what happens to that email after, because you're not a school board member anymore. So
Well, I'm just saying that, I mean, we said don't delete our emails because we need to hold them for longer, but I don't think we determined that it needed to be forever either.
okay.
So if we determine a period of time that is shorter than forever, then that may solve that issue for you, right?
That would, yes.
Yeah, I don't know what would be a pro. I mean, I'm certainly not opposed to having retention for the same period as the school contractors, employees, so on and so forth. I'm just wondering if it needs to be longer for whatever reason.
I mean, do you do it 2 years or you do it like the term of the, I don't know. I mean, part of it's 90 days. You go back and search and you look for, somebody sent you an email and it's gone, right? So you're how far is realistic to go back to search and look for this stuff?
Well, I guess the other issue that is specific to board members is that we don't have access to OJR methods of storage outside of email. Aside from, I guess we can put things on our Gmail or our Google Drives, right?
Correct.
So it would be on us if we wanted to save it longer than that retention policy. If everybody was on a year, including us, and we wanted to save something, we would have to do what an employee does, which is save it to a file and then put that file on our Google Drive.
And I could show everybody how to do that. That's what we do here.
So are we
fine with that? I don't know, 2 years the appropriate time. I mean, it's
I like 2 years on the school board, if we could do that.
yeah, there's
Sure.
only nine of us.
Sure. So we'll do a year with everyone, school board 2-year retention, and then off. Retire or not, or active.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say so. We may be interested in something somebody had
Sure.
to say, or somebody was written to someone who's not on the board anymore, all that kind of stuff.
You got it.
Yeah, I mean, the source of this, and I'm still struggling with the year a little bit, just because, just from a litigious, and preserving records point of view, if we come back in and someone says, "Oh, this happened to me 6 months ago or last year," whether it could be anybody, whether it's student, parent, contractor, or ex-employee, and we've wiped out our records, we have nothing to give our solicitors.
So Paul, are you okay with 2 years retention for school board?
I'm not talking about school board. I'm fine with the 2
Or
years.
you think 1 year is too short for everybody?
Yeah, I'm struggling with that a little bit, just from I mean, it's certainly an improvement, but I'm not sure that that's the final place this should land. But I guess if that's the easy we can do tomorrow, I'm fine with that. And then, I'm not saying I won't bring that back up again. I would like to hear from Fox Ross.
Paul San Francisco, can you just get us, let's make it easy. Can you get us a price on 2 years for everybody? And then you can inform us whether we save all that much money if we scale back to 180 days or whatever it was, a year and a half that Paul Friel was mentioning. But I just think, it might be easier just to see what the cost is to say we're going to retain everything 2 years. But I agree with Paul Friel. If we can make this change tomorrow and retain ours 2 years and everybody else's a year.
I can make that happen tomorrow. The year and 2 years for the board, we can make that change easily with our backup system, with our Google. The fear is later, if Google does start charging us for space,
right,
and we're storing all this, it's just, that's when the costs are going to rack up in the backup. But right now, for planning, we can do that. When you're asking a year and 2 years for the board, easily tomorrow.
And so that doesn't cost you. So I would say if Google comes back at some point and says, "Hey, there's going to be this cost," we'll deal with it then.
Okay. So what I'm hearing, just we're moving forward with a year and 2 years, and then we'll relook at this later.
And you're going to come back to us with what it would cost to do 2 years.
Yep.
Right.
So you have that in your action item, right, Paul?
I got it.
Okay.
And then does this record retention and disposition schedule, does that need to be voted on by the policy?
Yes,
It
you'd have
needs
to
to be
move it
approved by the
to the board. Yeah, if you could make a motion to move that with the changes explained by Paul Sanfran.
Do you have a motion?
I'd move that forward.
I second the motion.
Ayes? Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
All right, well, that concludes our business. We do have some time if there are people in the public who want to just ask about what we talked about tonight only, okay? We're going to have a board meeting next Monday where we can have the public discuss anything to their heart's content, but if there's any questions in regards to what we have discussed tonight, let's open it up for a little bit.
Dr. Melizek, we have one raised hand. It's Dana Calfone. You are unmuted.
Hi, thanks. It's Dana Chaffone from East Vincent Township. I just wanted to mention on the Title IX Policy 103 changes, it talks about training and resources for students and staff, but there's no mention of any training or resources for parents. I forget the name of the organization, I apologize, that provides the training on sexual harassment. And there were some modules they said that were available for parents that could be put online. I'm just wanting to put that out there that I think parents also need to be part of that process and need to be able to support their students and understand the things to look for. So just wanted to mention that as far as resources go and training, I would hope that parents would be considered as well. Thank you.
I think that's an awesome point.
Great point.
This one I did.
Wholeheartedly agree.
Okay.
I'll have to figure out where I saw it because I thought I did.
All right, anything else?
Dr. Melizek, there are no hands raised.
Oh my, I can't believe that.
Well, I think so. Just on the action item on that last point, to Dana's point, can we have Danielle or somebody pull that forward for us so we can see if there's a parent resource that we can put on our website? I mean, because that makes a lot of sense.
We should do it.
We can look into it, but I got to tell you right now, this Title IX training for our staff is all consuming. And so this isn't something she can turn around and do overnight.
Sure.
But it's definitely something that we can look at doing, because I need to keep her focused on the training for all of our staff so that we're ready for the implementation of this at the beginning of the school year, in addition to hiring employees for the start of the school year.
Yeah,
Good point.
I don't know there's a timeline on that. I just think if there's a resource already out there for this, that is just a matter of putting
We would need to vet it. And so I would rather we just be able to do it thoughtfully and not just throw something up there, say we have something up there. And I'm just reluctant to put more on her plate right now.
Yeah, I think maybe we could also have a conversation with Kelly Hodge. She may be familiar with, like, if there was something we needed to contract for, but absolutely agree with you, Susan. I would not want to divert attention away from the things we have to do, for sure.
Right, and I was really thinking in terms of, putting it on a roadmap, like saying, yeah, there's stuff we need to do for August 14th, but then there are a whole bunch of follow-up things that we'll be doing over the next few months, right?
There are, priority being getting all of the training that the employees need, that are part of this change, this extensive change to the law. In addition, everything that we put on our webpage, we have to make sure that we have approval, because if it's copyright protected, we've got to go and get approval from the owner of that copyright, which is why a lot of school districts are challenged right now to get the training online for their employees, because all of that is copyrighted. So fortunately, Fox Rothschild is not copywriting the training that they're providing us right now.
All right. Yeah.
Jennifer, I have an action plan, and I'll make sure that's part of the action plan going forward, because this is an ongoing. It's not going to just be done on the 14th. So absolutely.
Thanks.
And if there's something, Danielle, it's an area that maybe, again, the community has stepped up to say they wanted to help and all that kind of stuff. And I know maybe there's contacts with organizations they have, whatever, but we'll just keep an open ear on that stuff. I don't think it's something that we'll be constructing, because I think we need, experts in that area to kind of, I know as a parent, that whole field has changed since my kids were young and since I was a kid. So, there's a lot of updating that needs to be going on there, but I'll just say parents are probably the first line of defense,
Okay. Well, since Danielle, you look like you're in the middle of the night, let us have can I have a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All right, second. All right. All those in favor?
Bye.
Aye. Thanks,
All right.
everybody.
Thank you very much.
You guys.
See you
Thank
next
you.
Monday, if not sooner.
Bye-bye.